Chicago downtown. We are in Chicago downtown. Hi, Miss Fella. Rosita, see me. Hi. Mana-mana boleh lah. Paling pertama saya nampak topi merah tuh. Ya. Kosiza. Halo. Oh, dia mau sewa lain mah.
Halo moto.
Tapi nanti kita kalau naik boat kan, jauh sih ke jalan loh. Das lavender ya.
Mana tapnya, Bang?
Where are you parking? Where are you parking?
Level 1 row B.
Oh, Ruby. How about?
Row Austrian row.
Level 1 RO.
Row.
Ida,
Same lah.
Ida, mau makasih main air gak dia?
Ada
not
no
that
time.
side.
No time.
Same row. That the row the row B way.
So when it's all right.
Bella, come on. Oh, waterfall. Gitu kan ya?
Yeah, I suggest the shady side.
Come on, Bella. Nanti hilang kamu. Agak. Kita atas dulu lah. Nanti sini sudah keringat banyak loh. Atas dulu.
Nanti dia pergi kinti dulu tanda. Kau punya suami dengan itu nangis. Itu 3 orang.
Suka parkir tak mau kencing ya?
Ya.
Very hot. 70. rasa macam nak apa terjun dekat air saya nanti kan kita orang nak swimming tapi sekarang panas lagi.
Yeah, wait a minute.
Sini Kak, cantik Kak.
We are now in Chicago, Illinois.
Ini semua lelaki. Yes. You want play water? Not now, okay. We want go to swimming. Sini Phil, hot Phil. Ya. Nomor what, Min? Okay. Where is Rosida? Rosida? Oh. Taruh sini dulu lah, berat lah ini air. What happened? Oke, sini pegang sini. Honey, pakailah topinya. You don't like it? Masuk sana aja. Masuk lubang.
Kita na tangkal ka pa. Bye-bye. You were here for an hour.
Coba masuk sana. Oh, sana mana? Hey, mana dia? Sini, Val. Yes. Not follow Rosita. Sit down here. Oh, sit down here. Very hot Vela, sini Vela. Dia malas jalan loh, panas kan? You hot? come on. Have one empathy, look.
Still any passenger boat?
I think,
Still?
yeah. For sale, you want?
Okay.
We buy
How much?
private.
You ask how much?
Marina.
$10,000.
10,000? I have 10,000, huh?
10,000 to remain. Okay, credit lah. You pay monthly.
10,000, huh?
How much?
Banyak seperti itu. Look. Look. Okay lah. You want a small boat or a big boat? Huh? Big one? We're trying to get some boat. Sini, jangan tengah jalan. Sorry. Iya. Kalau malas jalan, boleh sih. Hold my hand. My friend over there. Come on. Kosida, you remember? You remember? We buy ticket, go to upstairs maybe? We ask first. Really? But like not people, not have people. Hold my hand, I told you. Takkan kok sudah 2 kali datang tak boleh dapat. Dulu mari dan tiket habis, ya. So I don't know today. No people, huh? I think another enter.
Look around, that's why no people you see. It's closed off.
Why? Oh, have people. Maybe ask somebody. Small. We can get small one. It's okay. Enough, right? Vela, nanti kamu hilang loh. Yes, banyak tak takut orang tuh. Hah? Oke. It's okay lah, Vela ikut. Tak apa ikut. We must go upstairs. Go, Sisa. Over there. And then buy some ticket there. You remember before they say we have to go to upstairs. But we ask somebody first. You want us?
They are also come from far, I think, taking picture, you think? Not from here.
Oh. Tadi ada orang mau tanya tak jadi. Tadi ada satu sana private punya mah tak boleh sewa itu. Hei, itu banyak besar.
Ya.
Itu seluruh dunia pesan ya? Kan?
Ya.
Boleh Europe sana.
Sabina litro. Sabina kamu ya ini. Terus lagi yang
Oh. Very high kan? That's Trump building.
Try to go home. It only took us like 25 minutes to get here.
I'm waiting for the boat, 30 minutes. The ticket is 6.15. Nanti kita lewat sana, Bu. Nampak? Itu tak penuh,
Hi.
I feel like you were wearing more.
Up there have Oke lah guys, saya mau cari toilet ya. Saya mau pergi toilet dulu. Bye, see you. Look. See you on the boat.
Lower it anymore. Though if we needed it to, pardon me, if we needed it to, it could still go up and
Jalan
down.
Raya.
Straight ahead, there's a beautiful glass building with that Y-shaped base. Almost looks a little bit like a giant pencil stuck into the ground. That is 150 North Riverside. 150 North Riverside from 2017. Same year that this other giant glass building here was built, 2017, River Point. So really transformational year for this area. 150 North Riverside, though, these giant new glass buildings that you see quite a few of just in front of you right now. These giant new glass buildings are a style of architecture we're calling next-gen contemporary. Next-gen contemporary. Why do we call it that? Well, the style, it is so new. It is so contemporary that the next generation will be the ones to name it something much cooler. It's actually too new for us to really have a category for yet, but I like to think of it a little bit like the iPhone of architecture. It is sleek, elegant, almost minimalist on the outside, but jam-packed with cutting-edge technology, complicated engineering on the inside. Built by the Gesh partners, you'll notice
Ada
it only
kereta
takes
api
up
jalan
about
kan?
20%
Train.
of its lot space.
Come here.
So there is a 1.5-acre park space
Wow.
around the base of this
The
building.
train, look, the
And this
train.
Y-shaped, it's called a cantilever design, is for two reasons. Number one, so that the building's caissons, again, the foundations of the building, that they don't interfere with the train
We
lines
will
running
1
beneath
hour
the building.
and 15 minutes
But number
here,
two, the city
right?
has an ordinance, a rule for a 30-foot setback for a river
So
walk
maybe
for
we
all
are-
the buildings by the river.
we're right
This is
about
super important to us here in Chicago.
15
that we
minutes
keep our
already, or
waterways, the river
20
and the lake, open, free, and
So
clear for
we
pedestrian
have 1
access
hour
for everyone
left.
to enjoy them. As you can see on that side of the river, this river walk. So that's why it's got the Y-shaped design. And the base of that building is thus only 39 feet wide. And it is
Hello.
very tall. So you're going to deal with something called building sway. When buildings sway, people get nauseous. So you have to do something about that. So here they use the technology called inertial slosh dampers. I'll say that again. Inertial slosh dampers. It basically works like water in a bucket. When this building sways in one direction, 160,000 gallons of water in 12 tanks at the top of the building sloshes in the opposite direction to correct for the sway. It's like this giant water shock absorber. The inertia creates a balancing liquid force, able to dampen the oscillation, bring that building back to rest more quickly, reducing sway and reducing the nausea. Very important. You gotta mitigate that sway somehow. On your left, another giant glass building called the Bank of America building, named after its largest tenant, the Bank of America. Finished in 2021, it is the newest addition to the Chicago River. And they also had to deal with that 30-foot setback for a Riverwalk rule. And they did so in a very creative way. They used these giant tripod legs to literally vault the building in midair. Those are huge steel I-beams taking on tons and tons of weight to suspend that building by its third floor,
Itu belum siap, ya?
maximize all that office space,
That's
and
new,
create
huh?
yet another lovely
Belum
little
siap lagi.
Riverwalk area. So I love the Riverwalk rule because I think in addition to
man.
creating all these beautiful pedestrian accessways, which makes Chicago such a walkable
What'd
city,
you say?
it also makes
What'd you
architects
say?
and engineers work in these really creative ways to find innovative solutions
Okay.
like this one.
Uh-huh.
But we are now going to jump into our aforementioned time
Right.
machine because these next 5 buildings, coming up on your right, these next 5 buildings were all built in chronological order. So they really demonstrate the evolution of architecture not only here in Chicago, but across the United States. First up on your right, you've got 2 Riverside Plaza.
Civic
2 Riverside,
Opera
another example of art
building.
deco. You see those dark windows, dramatic vertical lines, Indiana limestone beige color, again, roaring 1920s. But what happened in 1929, this stock market? It crashed. And we entered the Great Depression. And there was a virtual freeze on the building of office buildings from 1932 to 1957. That's about 25 years of no building in Chicago. But when we reboot architecture in the late 50s and 60s, we jump right into black box modernism, which you can see over there on the right in Gateway Centers 1 and 2, black box modernism. The father of that style of architecture was a man named Mies van der Rohe. Mies van der Rohe, very famous Chicago-based architect who said that less is more. Less is more. So I think that there's an elegant simplicity to
Nanti
these
boleh
black
dengar balik
boxes.
dekat live.
They are
Dia
dark,
cakap apa?
stark, cheap, and easy to make. These buildings, they are more functionally beautiful instead of being aesthetically beautiful, right? But I mean, why build like this? How do we go from that fancier Art Deco style of the 20s and the 30s to just building some simple boxes? Well, this was the post-World War II generation of developers and architects. It was the post-Great Depression generation. These were people who were more naturally thrifty, who were worried, about wasting money on big, fancy office buildings. They said that an office building, it's just a machine for people to work in. So let's just get in there, get the job done, do nothing too fancy, and that is exactly what they did. That's why they built over 60 of these black box modernist buildings in Chicago. And if you start to walk around the city, you'll notice them just all over the
Macam
place.
sama
And that's
aja,
because the
ya?
father of the style, Mies van der Rohe, was living here in Chicago. But jumping ahead to the groovy 1970s with the international style of Gateway Center 3. So in the 70s, as you can tell,
Kalau hujan
that white
habis
building
lah, kita kena
there, we are
turun.
still building
Turun kan,
boxes,
kalau hujan.
right? But now they're going to have a little more style in the form of precast
Tapi kita boleh
concrete
turun lah kalau
or
hujan.
stone cladding. And the buildings can even
We
be...
go to downstairs.
Wow.
Sorry.
Wait! How exciting. A whole new color.
Kalau
comes
hujan,
up to
kita boleh
explain
turun
on
bawah.
it. And we call this the international style because you can see a building like this being built anywhere in the world in the 1970s, maybe even in your hometowns. I really recommend
we
going
can
back to your
drink some
hometowns,
food and
the cities
then
near where you
eating, sit
live, to
down,
see if you
you
can
know?
see some of these trends taking place. Because I guarantee you, particularly if you live in the U.S.,
Fela,
you
you
see
ate
some
already?
very similar trends.
What you eat?
But I want to go to my favorite decade for architecture, the 1980s, with Gateway Center 4, that curvy glass building on your right. So in the 80s, architects are tired of boxes. They're tired of all this square thinking. They think the modernism style, meh, boring. They want something bolder, something fresher, something with some style again. Thus, contextualism is born. You'll notice this curve in the building, mimicking once more the upcoming curve in the river. And that greenish color of the glass is matching the color of the river in this particular spot. So again, contextualism, it's all about blending in with surroundings, but also all about glass. Glass was a new material for architects to play with in this way in the 80s and 90s. But next up on your left is a black box building that we never used to talk about on these tours, and that made the owners kind of mad. So they spent over $800,000 to literally put themselves on the map. This is a giant "You Are Here" map of the Chicago River, and that little red Lego piece up there that represents this building here on the Chicago River. You can even see Chicago's organized grid system, those squares depicted on the map. So, you know, if you're ever lost in downtown Chicago and you drop your phone in the river, you can just look up at that building
Okay.
and know exactly where to go, right? But next up on your right, another enormous Art Deco building that you might recognize if you are a Batman fan, because this is where Heath Ledger's Joker robbed a Gotham City bank in the 2008 film The Dark Knight. If anyone remembers the movie, the Joker drives this big school bus full of cash straight out of this building in the opening scene. One of many films shot here in Chicago. We have a growing film and TV industry here. Lots of TV shows shoot here nowadays. Chicago Med, Chicago Fire, Chicago PD. Lots of movies as well. However, this used to be the old main post office. This was once the largest post office in the world at one point. You might be asking yourselves, why do we need such a big post office? Well, way before Amazon, way before the internet, Chicago was actually the mail order catalog capital of the world. We had the likes of Sears department store here, among others, and we needed such a huge post office to handle all the ingoing and outgoing mail. But nowadays, no longer a post office. This is office space for big companies like Uber, Walgreens, PepsiCo. And I have a friend who works for Uber. She told me that there is a 3.5-acre rooftop park on this building with a basketball court, a tennis court, and a bar for all those very lucky employees of that building.
Ini atas jalan raya ya. Angin banyak bagus so.
As we sail down the lovely South Branch of the river, we're on the South Branch now. We are headed south. First of all, if we follow the South Branch to its conclusion, you'd eventually reach, through other rivers, you'd eventually reach the Mississippi River, and then you could ride that Mississippi all the way down to the Gulf
Ini belum
of
buat.
Mexico.
Belum jadi ya.
We will not be doing that tonight, but we could. Now we have reached the storytelling portion of the tour. So remember I told you at the beginning, Chicago's story is one of resiliency, of strength, tenacity in the face of problems or challenges. I just want you just to keep that in your mind as you listen to the next couple of stories. Here's the first story. The Great Chicago Fire of 1871. Maybe some of you have heard about the fire before. It's pretty famous as far as fires go. But in talking about this fire, we need to first separate the facts from the fiction. So I would like to start with the fiction. This is the not true story. Not true. This is the myth, the legend, if you will. It goes like this. In 1871, a cow.
Yeah.
Cow.
There's many
Mrs.
cars was
O'Leary's
up
barn. So the story goes, got very angry with Mrs. O'Leary, and the cow purposefully kicked over a kerosene lantern, which started the whole barn on fire, and soon the whole city on fire. Now this cow and Mrs. O'Leary, they are tried in court, guilty of causing the greatest urban inferno of all time.
Itulah tawar.
Maybe that story to some of
Itulah,
you might
kita
be
kena naik
familiar.
sana,
Maybe
kan?
somewhere along the way someone
Apa?
told you about a cow that
Itu
started a
tawar, kan?
fire. Well, I'm here to tell you that the cow part is
Mungkin
not
ya?
true. Now it is true that Mrs. O'Leary, she was an
Itu kan,
Irish
kita
Catholic
kena naik
immigrant.
itu kan?
She did have a barn in Chicago, and it is true that she had a cow. And it is true that we believe the fire did start in her barn.
Maybe this one.
But there is no proof whatsoever to put it on the cow or poor Mrs. O'Leary or anyone else for that matter. We don't know how this fire started, and we never ever will. But the city of Chicago, they officially exonerated Mrs. O'Leary and her cow very swiftly in 1997. So they took over 125 years to do so, but it cleared her name. Now, here are the facts that we do know. In the mid-1800s, Chicago's population is exploding with industrialization, all these new jobs, and our building is trying to keep up with
Satu hari
all of the
surah
growth.
kena
But the
panas,
problem
muka pun
was,
surah
we were
hitam,
building
guys.
everything out of
Jalan-jalan Chicago.
wood. When I say everything, even the streets and the
Kan, satu
sidewalks
hari
of
terus kena
Chicago,
panas
they used to be
semua, ya.
made out of wood. So you can see where this might
Sekarang oke lah. Tadi macam
Around
mana
9
tadi?
p.m.
Sekarang oke.
On October 8th, 1871,
Setelah
a
hari
fire
ini jalan
started
banyak,
in
guys.
Mrs. O'Leary's barn, which is located just a few blocks to your right, actually. Now that fire raged for 3 days. It destroyed 17,000 buildings, with 100,000 people homeless and propertyless, and tragically killed about 300 people. 3.5 square miles of the city burnt to a crisp, the largest urban fire of all time. High winds in the Windy City were able to create fire tornadoes that jumped across the Chicago River, twice lighting the river itself on fire. Adjusted for inflation, there was about $4 billion in property damage. This epic disaster, it made headline news across the world. But remember how I told you that Chicago is resilient? That fire was the worst and the best thing to ever happen to Chicago, because it meant to the city it had to fully rebuild and reinvent itself. Architects, they flocked to Chicago from across the country. People like Louis Sullivan, Daniel Burnham, and they learned from Chicago's mistakes. They started to build out of steel frames instead of wood. The rebuilding of Chicago started the very next day after that fire. And it has not looked back since. But there's just 15 years of the Great Chicago Fire. Within 15 years, a man named William LeBaron Jenney, he would build the very first steel frame skyscraper, the first true skyscraper ever, right here in Chicago. We would not be the same city that we are today without this fire. Debris from that fire was even used to build up our historic lakefront. We don't have that same beautiful 20-plus mile lakefront we have today without this fire. Because before the fire, to be honest, Chicago was
Baru cakap,
constructed pretty
saya macam ni ya.
with poor design and worse technology. But after the fire, we were redesigned with more intentionality, with better materials and better technology.
Oke lah.
So Chicago, it is often called
Why,
the
you
second
scam?
city. It's one of our many nicknames. That is in part it being Chicago 2.0, the city that rose like a phoenix from the ashes of a fire. Over here on your left, brief interlude. On your left, you can see this huge expanse of empty sort of space, right? Not much going on over here, just a huge big patches of grass essentially. So this is going to be the 78th. This is a development project, real estate development project here in Chicago. That's going to be called the 78, which is basically the idea being that it's going to be the 78th community area of Chicago, basically building a whole new neighborhood in Chicago that is going to take up this entire expanse of space.
Jalan-jalan, guys.
It's a really big project, as you can tell. At the top of 77 West Wacker, you'll notice this Greek-style temple. So this is a style of architecture called neoclassical. You take this classical design, like the Parthenon in this case, and you update it using the modern materials of glass and steel. Now, if you're here at night, maybe just right after this tour, after the sun goes down, I recommend coming down to the Riverwalk, check out the lighting on that building, because at nighttime, they glow up the granite in a really spectacular way. But I do recommend going for a stroll by the river at night, maybe just right after the tour, just to really see how the city transforms from daytime to nighttime as each building gets lit up in its own specific, unique way. But this whole area of the city over to your left, this whole neighborhood of the city that's over to your left, is known as the Loop. The Loop. Why do we call it the Loop? Well, we have a public transportation system here, known as the L, which stands for elevated train, because it's mostly elevated throughout the city, that branches into all the different neighborhoods. And then the trains, they converge in the downtown area, and they will literally go in a loop. Hence this whole neighborhood being called the Loop. And Chicago is located where it is today because of this river we're sailing down. This Chicago River in the 1800s was the waterway that connected the Great Lakes to the Mississippi River, and it does connect the east coast of the U.S. to the Mississippi River. Barges and merchandise used to sail all up and down these waters, and we've been a center of trade ever since that time period. Now, we are also a city that likes to respect its architectural heritage, which you can see over on the left in the Builders Building. You notice this building was built in two parts. That left-hand side was built in 1927, while that right-hand side was built in 1986. That's about 60 years apart, but you'll notice they're in this very similar style, because they made this new part of the building to complement its historical section, albeit with some fancy new bay windows. So we like to mix the old with the new here in Chicago. It's something that's so dynamic about our architecture is that you'll see a 100-year-old building right next to a brand new one. And it just makes for a very interesting juxtaposition of style that makes our architecture almost like you're going to a little time machine. You just bebop around to all these different decades. Speaking of going back in time, coming up on your right, you got the one, the only, the biggest boy of them all, the Merchandise Mart, or simply the Mart. The Merchandise Mart, a behemoth of a building, is a style called Art Deco. Art Deco. And it has all the classic features of Art Deco. You got deep inset windows, streamlined vertical lines like these racing stripes drawing your eye up, 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 and this polished Indiana limestone beige color. This was a style for the roaring 1920s, ornate, elegant, ostentatious. If each generation kind of takes its own values and expresses them in three dimensions
We are
through
here
architecture.
like 1 hour and 15, yeah,
Art
sit
Deco
down.
were expressing just
For
the luxury
going around
and the optimism that was characteristic of
on
the
the
roaring
Chicago
20s
downtown.
period. But we are now about to enter one of my favorite spots of the entire river and one of the best photo ops on this entire river, and that is called Wolf Point. Wolf
This boat have
Point,
two
where you will be
stairs,
able to see nearly 360
and
degrees
downstairs have also
of
toilet,
pure
restroom.
glass skyscraper. Let's start over here on the left for this glass building, the Nuveen Building, 333 Wacker. The Nuveen Building is another example of contextualism, because you'll notice this curve in the building is matching the curve in the river. And the blue glass matches the blue of the sky, while the turquoise matches the green of the river. So that is contextualism as well. You're trying to blend in with the natural context, fit in with the natural features of the area, in this case being the river. And that is where Ferris Bueller's dad famously looked down on the parade, the 1980s Chicago documentary, Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Straight ahead, River Point with this spirally red sculpture in front of it. River Point is from 2017. Many of the buildings currently surrounding you were built within the last 10 years or so. So this whole area has transformed in a very dramatic fashion recently. But River Point, with
The
those
cost
arches at the
is
top and at the
47
bottom,
for
I've had many
adult
passengers tell me they think
and
it's a little bit
24
like one of those
for a
McDonald's pie
baby.
boxes. Personally, I think
After
it's more
three
like a hot
years,
bucket,
yeah.
but, you know,
After
take
3
a bit.
years
And that
up
archway at the bottom there
is
has two functions.
24.
Number one, works as a really amazing rain gutter for the entire building. Water just shoots right down.
The,
But number two,
24 is
more importantly, it's so that the
without,
building's
I think without
caissons,
text.
the foundations of the building, don't interfere
And
with the Metro
for
and
adult
Amtrak
is,
train lines that go directly
47
underneath
with text.
the building. And those train lines run underneath all
But this
the
is
buildings
like
on this
a-
side of the river. straight ahead.
Little bit,
This red building here is called Fulton
less,
House.
yeah.
Fulton House is
The
the
price.
oldest building still
The
standing on the
expensive
Chicago
one is,
River, built in 1898.
59.
1898.
Okay.
And it was originally a cold storage
So I choose
freezing
the
building
little
for
bit
the
cheaper.
meat packing industry.
Good
Meat
choice,
packing, one of our huge exports in the early 1900s.
Because
We were
now
famously
everything is
called
up,
the
yeah?
hog butcher
It's okay.
of the world. These cities
It's worth it
of
for
broad
me.
shoulders after our strapping
I
meat packers.
enjoy it for
They would bring
the view.
barges of beef
It's
from the
pretty
south side of
view.
Chicago, freeze them in Fulton House here, and then ship them to
See,
export
very
across the country
pretty,
on
look.
trains, like the one that used to run on the upraised bridge straight ahead. But meat packing
Smile.
went away in the 1970s,
Smile.
which is when they turned the building into what you see now, condominiums.
Pokoknya
And they say it
centang
took
agak
about
kami yang
3
belakang tengok.
months for this entire building to thaw out, because it was basically just this giant freezer for the better part of a century with no windows. But next up on your left, one of my favorites on the river, because I've never seen anything that look quite like them, the river cottages. You notice the river cottages have a triangular design, right? And these almost porthole looking windows, almost like it's reminding you of a sailboat. Well, that's because the architect, Harry Weiss, he was an avid sailor and he put nautical themes into many of his buildings.
I will
But when
close
Weiss
it and
built
then
these
left
cottages back in
again.
1988,
Because
people thought he
I don't
was
have
nuts,
enough
and
of
not
the
just for
battery.
design. See, back in the 80s, no one really wanted to live
will
on the North
live
Branch
again.
of the Chicago